Hi everyone, hope you're having a great week. Today we're going to be making a diorama that has multiple islands and cliffs. I finally have an actual name for this one even though it's not really catchy. This one was pretty fun to make, so I hope you guys enjoy. We'll start off by cutting out our basic landform pieces using a hot wire table and XPS foam. Depending on whether you're generating a lot of fumes or dust throughout this entire process, you'll probably want to wear a respirator and have some type of ventilation in the AO. Here's all of the pieces I cut out. You'll have to play a little Tetris minigame as you put all the pieces together while you're making sure they fit properly. I'm scrubbing the foam top and bottom with a wire brush before I glue them so the pieces stick better together. After all that jazz, we can put some weight on the foam to keep the glue from shifting our pieces as the glue expands. I like to use a hot wire cutter to cut the shapes of my scene, but a knife will do the trick. It just might be a little more messy. I'm primarily just trying to remove the really sharp edges to the cliffs, as I found out before they'll be quite noticeable through the Sculptamold if I don't. And we wouldn't want that, would we? The final step before we begin the really fun part, applying the Sculptamold. I just like to toss it all on and slowly sculpt the landscape as it starts to harden. Make sure you're shining sunlight on every 3.5 minutes or it'll light on fire, so keep that stopwatch close. JK. I like to apply the Sculptamold everywhere, even on the sides, because I like to have some texture for the sediment lines I add later. I think it makes my scene a little more dynamic. Now we can just paint the scene. I like to use this burnt umber for the ground that I dilute with water to help remove the whiteness of the scene. I should have sculpted my cliffs first, but I really enjoy painting the scene, so I just jumped right into it. I should probably start sculpting the cliffs when I first apply the sculpt mold, but laziness usually takes hold of my soul and breaks it in two. I just try to remove any weird looking plaster around the cliffs by trying to shape them in a more round angle, I guess. After we're done with all that, I like to use a diluted mixture of gray and black as my base color for my cliffs. For the base layer, you can just brush it on, but we'll need to dab our other layers of paint. For the second layer of paint, we'll be using this concrete color. I try not to apply too much of this, I just want enough to help blend in all of the colors. I always just use the paint that's on the lid of the bottle when using my other layers of paint. Also, I just dab on the paint randomly. And now we can apply our stone gray paint. Again, I'm just using the lid's paint and just dabbing it on. Then I like to apply a little bit of this burnt umber around the cliffs where dirt would be most likely to collect. And finally, I apply an extremely light amount of this white paint all around my cliffs to try and highlight the details in them. Most of the paint I brush off on my hand, as you'll see. I just need a very small amount. I kept dipping too much paint on my brush, so that's why there's a lot of paint on my hand. After everything's painted, we can apply our dirt. I start by slathering some diluted matte Mod Podge where I want my dirt, and then laying down that premium grade A sifted dirt. Before I put down my static grass, we'll be punching some holes where our trees will be so we can avoid putting grass around them. As you may know, trees are fighting a never-ending nutrient war against the surrounding plants, which they usually win, so there's typically not many plants near them. I'm using full strength matte Mod Podge and applying the glue randomly. I'm putting down my 4mm static grass first, and I don't want a whole lot of grass put down, so I don't use much glue. Next I'll be using the little baby light green 2mm static grass. I put a lot more glue down because I want more of this smaller grass around the scene. Now we'll be adding some light green and green turf in between the grasses around the scene to bring a little more depth to the scene and hopefully mimic some smaller grasses or plants. And then we'll seal the turf up with some isopropyl alcohol and scenic glue. To help secure my resin, I'm just using scotch tape and a hot glue gun. I wanted to put down my resin first because I was planning on removing bubbles with the lighter and I didn't want to set my scene on fire. I'm using a tabletop epoxy resin that uses a 50-50 ratio of hardener and epoxy. There's been a lot of bubbles forming in my recent dioramas, but I think I know why, so next time it won't be so bubbly, hopefully. The resin should be clear here, but there's just so many bubbles. Too many. I'm using this ocean blue resin dye to make my water. It's unfortunate there's so many bubbles, but it's not that big of a deal for me right now.
No sense leaving the story of a lifetime untold, Captain.
I'm tired of talking tricks. I just want to get up to my shack and get drunk.
I liked how my water came out regardless of the bubbles onslaught, and I just have to fix the paint that came off because of the glue. Now we can begin planting our trees. I'm just using matte Mod Podge and a trusty toothpick to secure them in place. For the bushes, I'm using light green coarse turf and green foliage. I prefer coarse turf over more thicker foliage because it's easier to manipulate to the size I want. I just place them randomly around the scene, but I kind of leave room for a walking path to the top of the cliff. After our bushes are placed, we can seal them up with isopropyl alcohol and scenic glue again. I made the waterfalls with this water effects gel from Woodland Scenics. I tried applying it onto this non-stick oven sheet thinking it would be easier to take off because I thought it just wouldn't stick at all. Obviously I was pretty wrong and it stuck onto the sheet pretty good, but I added some onto this acrylic glass too, so we're Gucci. It's definitely a pain to remove because glass is probably one of the most sticky surfaces to use, but it came off perfectly after some patience and time. Before I put my waterfall down, I used some Mod Podge gloss to create my water ripples. I wanted a subtle amount of water ripples, so I didn't use a whole lot of glue. It was kind of awkward placing the waterfall, but I eventually got it in a good position. One thing I forgot to record was me using white paint to paint the waterfall and at the base of the waterfall to simulate the waves crashing. Now we can finish up repairing any paint damages that happened and add some sediment lines to our scene. And there you have it, ladies and gents. Thank you guys for watching and I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to try and make a video about every 2 weeks and release it on the weekends. I tried making a video every week and it was a bit much for me to do and it took the fun out of doing these, so I want to give myself some more time to make them and take my time with them. Anyways, hope you guys have a fantastic week and I'll see you next time. Peace out.